In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions about the NBA draft. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It is your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions all episode long. And today's topic, the theme of today's mailbag, is the NBA draft because, y'all, it's draft season. This is a topical show. And I asked for listener-submitted questions maybe 10 days ago about the NBA draft, and some of you delivered, and I appreciate it. If you want to get involved in a future mailbag episode, the way to do it is to email me lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. That's lockedonblazers, the name of the podcast, pod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. You can send me a question whenever you're thinking of it. It's when I don't always solicit questions for the mailbag, but it's a great place. That's the way to get in touch with me. If you send me a question there, I will use it. Typically use it in a future mailbag, or I'll just straight up respond to you and we can have it. I'll just tell you what I think when you ask me a question. Without further ado, though, let's get into it. We're talking NBA draft and all things today. And this first question comes from Jason, who asks, what one skill do you think we, and that is a collective pronoun. It's been a while since we've highlighted collective pronouns on the program, but that's a collective pronoun. What skill do you think we should be rooting for in this draft? This is a rare one because we is the collective pronoun that represents the fan base. I like it. It's the collective pronoun that's the fan base. We, the rooting the public for the Trailblazers as opposed to the team. Jason, I think the answer to this question is the obvious one, which is kind of boring, but it's just true. The number one skill that the Blazers, if you could just draft, if you could just draft a skill set, right? Because you have to draft a player, and every player comes with flaws, and a lot of the Blazers, players in Blazers range might not have this skill set. But if you could just draft a skill set, what's one thing that we could add? Maybe shooting. I mean, that would really unlock a lot of the Blazers' issues. I think the Blazers have some intriguing young parts, but a lot of those intriguing young parts shoot bricks. Jabari Walker shoots bricks. Chris Murray shoots bricks. Dumani Kamara mostly shot bricks this season. Scoot Henderson certainly shoots bricks. Shaedon Sharpe did not shoot well this year. DeAndre Ayton does not shoot outside of 20 feet under any circumstances. He's at the end of the year. I complained enough on the podcast that DeAndre Ayton did take some 3-pointers, but still, he doesn't unless he absolutely has to. And they don't even have sets or actions where DeAndre Ayton spaces to the corner. It's just they could use shooting. Shooting would unlock everything. It wouldn't it's not like if they had one competent shooter, all of a sudden they'd be a magically good team, but it would unlock so many of their problems. Scoot would be way better if he could kick out to real shooters, right? I think some of the time this year is that he made the right reads and passed it to players who are incapable of finishing the reads he made. DeAndre Ayton wants to operate at his office, which is right at the foul line in the middle of the court. That's where he's most comfortable, basically elbow to elbow at that 15 to 19 feet range. That's where he wants to be. And if you have shooters that can spread the corners of the court, particularly in the perimeter and the wings of the court, then Ayton would have space to do that, and it's harder to double, harder to send help. Players play way off Scoot Henderson, but if you couldn't also bring, not only gap him, but also bring over, pull in the help all the way to the nail, all the way to the paint. Life would be easier for him. I think with Anthony Simons on the ball, it's obviously he typically gets double teams and that his gravity is valuable, but because they don't respect the shooters around Anthony Simons, teams can sell out even harder on double teams because the recovery in the back half of the defense is just not the same. Shooting is the thing. They were 28th in the league in 3-point shooting. They're every team in the league basically shoots between 31 and 42 3-pointers. That's just how the league works now. Like the teams that don't shoot very many, like Denver, shoot 30 a game, and the teams that shoot a ton, like Boston, shoot 40, 43 a game, 42 and some change a game. So it's like 31 to 42 is literally the range of all 30 teams. Everybody shoots in there. The Blazers are bottom 10 in the league in frequency, but they're not like, they're shooting, 33 a nights, which I think 33, 35 is just like a very normal number now in the league. That's what everyone is shooting. It's how the league works. You have to have shooters. 28th in accuracy though, like only Detroit and Orlando were worse than them shooting from three. Orlando propped up by an excellent defense. Detroit, the worst team in the league. So like and I think the lack of shooting really showed up for Orlando in the playoffs. It's like they're good enough to get there. They're good enough to be competitive when they're there, but they just their half court offense was clunky once they got to the postseason. And the Blazers are a long way away from that. They're definitely closer to Detroit than Orlando right now. But like, shooting would help. The secondary skill is probably playmaking. I think that would be the second thing you'd add. It's just like more dudes who could pass, because if you have more guys who can pass, you can run more creative stuff. I'm not sure that this particular coaching staff, obviously they're going to add some new coaches, so we'll see how it works, but because they have 3 assistant coaching vacancies, but like, I don't think this particular coaching staff is super creative offensively. I think they're fine on defense, but they're not creative at all on offense, in my opinion. But you can just be more creative if you have more playmakers. If you have more guys who can pass, more guys with that sort of skill to make 2 dribbles, get somewhere, and then make a read off the help defense. Like you can do a lot more things, or at least like even your vanilla stuff looks more creative because you have guys who can make plays. The Blazers don't have a ton of high-level passers on the team. I think playmaking would be the second thing I would add. But like ideally that playmaking would come from a tall person. It wouldn't be from another guard, and that's hard to pick. And like when I'm saying one skill, it's like, you don't draft skill. Like you draft players, and then they say, okay, well they can and can't do this. And like, you wouldn't say like, I think it would be a mistake to go in and say like, okay, well, Montes Pizzella struggled as a shooter in the G League, even though he's supposed to be a shooter coming out. And Ron Holland wasn't a shooter in the G League. And Cody Williams shot well, but on incredibly low volume and basically just like didn't attempt threes in college. And so, you got to pass on them because they're not shooters, right? Like you just kind of, you play the board. If you could pick one skill, you would pick shooting, but you play the board, and the board is probably not going to offer the Blazers a high-level shooter. The high-level shooter that's going to be in their range probably is Dalton Knecht. He's not my Huckleberry. He's obviously, I think he's probably going to be an NBA player because of his athleticism and his shooting, but like, I don't see him as having enough upside to being worth it to a team like the Trailblazers, who could just like, they need to hit a star, right? They'd be better off swinging for someone and missing than hitting someone who ends up being like, the pretty decent seventh man, or like a good offensive player in the NBA. They'd be much better off, in my opinion, like hoping that Cody Williams pops into being a star, hoping that Ron Holland pops into a star, because they just need to swing upside with those picks. Not to mention, everyone's favorite Tijan Salah, who might be on the board at 7, and he has some shooting upside in terms of like, he looks like he could be a shooter, but he hasn't shot particularly well in the pros just yet, or in his professional league just yet. So I think it's shooting and then playmaking. Those would be 1-2 in the league for me, or 1-2 if you had to pick your flav, pick your what skill you would pursue. I think what the real truth of the Blazers is that they're just not good enough at any particular spot to say, okay, well, we have this covered. What else can we get? They have a lot of like, they have a variety of like wings with limited offense and defensive potential, and they might end up finding themselves in a spot where the best player to draft on the board is a wing with limited offense and defensive potential, and that's just going to be how this cookie crumbles. Like I think they have to, in some ways they have to ignore the roster. Not entirely, but I think they have to be true. They have to be honest with themselves about where they are, which brings me to the question I want to talk about. And the next question in the second segment is about drafting players, drafting over players that are already on the roster. Listener Pete has a question about Donovan Clingan and exactly that. And we will talk all about that in the second segment. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. It's the place for last-minute tickets. If you are in the Portland area and you want to go to a Portland Timbers match this weekend, they host Sporting Kansas City. What I remember them being is the Kansas City Wiz, but I may have missed 20 years of MLS. You could go see Sporting KC on the low, thanks to the Gametime app, the number one spot for last-minute tickets. You are listening to Wednesday's show and say you want to go to the show and you're like, Wednesday, I don't know, Friday, Thursday, I don't know, Friday, you make the decision. Gametime is going to be the number one spot for the procrastinators in this, listening to me right now. I checked in the Gametime app as I'm, just before I hit record here, $30 is the get-in price. You can get in the stadium for $30. You can sit in the Timbers Army for that game on Saturday evening, 7:30 kickoff, $44, or you can sit on the east side and like that the newer sort of club side, $56 to sit upstairs on the east side of the stadium. You want to go see some professional soccer? You want to go see the Timbers? They're not very good, but it's always a fun night at the stadium. Gametime's going to be the place to do it. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. They like I said, they got last minute deals, so you can save up to 60% off your tickets for if you wait on games, if you're looking for last-minute tickets, but they also just make it easier in general. So download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, let's keep it rolling with our mailbag episode. If you want to get a mailbag episode or mailbag question in a future episode, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com is the address, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. This next question comes from Pete. Listener Pete, thanks. If he is available, would you draft a big rim protector like Donovan Clingan? This is like I do a lot of times on the show. Is a much longer email from Pete that I've condensed down to a very, very brief question. The sort of the longer idea is like the Blazers have DeAndre Ayton. He's 25 years old. He's going to be 26 when the season starts. He had a nice second half of the season. He's not like ancient and old. He's under contract for a couple more seasons. The Blazers, he was a big part of the trade for their franchise icon Damian Lillard. Like they've have at least some invested in him. Like, would it make sense to draft someone who projects as a backup in the near and medium term, at least the first couple seasons of their career? And if DeAndre Ayton's good, like if the Blazers bet pays off and he actually ends up being like someone who signs a contract here and is in the future, is drafting a player with a high pick, say 7, worth it for someone who maybe doesn't project to have a clear spot, and if things go right, wouldn't have a clear spot? Or do you like make the pick and say, okay, we're committed to this youngster, let's start shopping DeAndre Ayton and all of those things? I think this is a good question because it gets to sort of the whole theoretical way the Blazers should, could, might, and maybe will approach the draft. I have said on the show before, and I think I believe it pretty wholeheartedly, the Blazers don't have a single player on their team talented enough that you shouldn't draft over them, or you should be worried about drafting over them, assuming. Not like, okay, no matter what, go draft a big, right? Because DeAndre Ayton sucks. Like, I don't mean that at all. What I mean is like, if you get to 7, and the best player on the Blazers board by far is Clingan, right? They had him rated as the number 2 guy in this particular draft. He's fallen all the way to 7. The next, it's a huge step down for them in terms of tier and skill set wise, to go to the next player on the board. The team is not talented enough, and they're so far away from being competitive in the future that you just draft based on best player available to an extent. I don't think it makes sense to draft either of the Kentucky guys because whether you have Scoot or Anthony Simons or both on the roster into the future, asking either of them to play next to a 6'2", 6'3" other guard seems silly, right? Like if you've watched the NBA over the last 5, 6, 10 years, big wings has been the thing. You just can't be small at 2. You can be, I think Scoot Henderson's not small at 1. He's maybe short for NBA players, but he's he's big and strong, long arms, all of those things. And Anfernee Simons is like a totally normal size. If you were to play point guard, he's just too small to play shooting guard in the league, right? And too small, not physical enough to play shooting guard in the league. So like drafting Reed Sheppard doesn't really make sense. Drafting Rob Dillingham doesn't make sense. But pretty much everyone else projected in the lottery is like within the realm of reasonableness. I think Nikola Topic gets to an interesting one, right? Because he's point guardy, but he's like 6'6", 6'7". But if he's like a non-shooter who needs the ball in his hands, that doesn't seem like a good fit with Scoot. So unless you have him, again, unless he's like the second best player on your board and all of a sudden he's there available at 7 and you say, we can't pass up this talent, I think his size is enough where you start to have, it starts to get a little bit interesting. But for the most part, it's like, I don't think they have a single player on the team that is good enough to say, we shouldn't draft over the top of them. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do that. Like they just need it. The Blazers need to go to best player available to an extent. And I think Donovan Clingan fits that extent, right? Because I'm a little skeptical of Clingan, I'll be honest. Like I think he's projects to probably be a pretty darn good defensive player in the league. And there's some reporting from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski that he's in play for any of the top 3 picks, which is wild, right? Like, I don't think watching him in either of the UConn's championship runs the last 2 years, I said, that's the number 2 pick in the NBA draft. I said, he's big and good. That's kind of it. But like, I don't think I saw the second pick in the NBA draft, but every draft class is different. And so like he could go as high as 2, right? I guess based on Woj's reporting, go as high as 1. He's like he's in the conversation for those top 3 picks. He might be there at 7. I am skeptical of what he does on offense. I am skeptical of what he becomes on offense. I think he can pass a little bit, and I think he probably has some shooting touch potential, although he hasn't shown it yet, and he wasn't a particularly good free throw shooter. But like, there's some idea that he could have some shooting touch, and maybe the passing helps him kind of mitigate some of his shooting woes, and he just only takes shots right inside 4 feet, but he can make plays otherwise. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good defender in the league. He looks like he has a lot of defensive potential, and maybe has some scheme versatility. If not, he's just going to be an elite drop big guy, and elite drop bigs, they cover the rim and they make it hard to score, and defending the rim is still the most important thing to do in the league. I wouldn't be super excited about him at 7, but I wouldn't be disappointed by any means. I don't know that there's a ton of players that I would be like capital E excited in this draft, right? I think there's a lot of guys who I'd be intrigued by, and I think Clingan is like low level intriguing for me. I bet he'll be an NBA player. I bet he'll play in the league for a while. I wouldn't like he's a second contract guy for me because I think the defense translates, and I think and he's gigantic, right? And like if you can defend and you're gigantic and play, he didn't play a ton of minutes in college, so it's like depending on how much he can play, I think that's a big question for him. He's fine, but if the Blazers value him at 7. I don't think DeAndre Ayton's good enough. I don't think Duop Reith's good enough. I don't think Robert Williams is good enough to say, oh no, we can't take another center. We can't invest in it. The reason that you wouldn't take another center is because of positional versatility matters in the league, right? And like maybe you'd rather have a guy who could play and defend 2, 3, and 4 as opposed to a guy who's like a true 5. Maybe drafting a true 5 period is like maybe not as appealing in the way the league works. Although I don't think I think we're heading into an era where its size is going to be equally valuable as what it was, because there isn't going to be a Steph Curry to chase around on the perimeter. At least it doesn't look like that as such. But I think the answer to your question, Pete, is if he was available, would you draft a big rim protector like Donovan Clingan? I might not, but I don't think it would be a problem if the Blazers did, because I don't think it would be a problem if the Blazers drafted pretty much anyone taller than like anyone 6'5" and above. I don't think it would be a problem if they drafted maybe 6'6" and above. However tall we think Stephon Castle is. I think measured at 6'5.5" barefoot. So 6'5.5" without shoes and above, I think is fine, because I think they'd be better off investing in size, and that allows them some flexibility with whatever they want to do with Scoot Henderson and Anfernee Simons into the future. Okay. One more question to close the show, and this one is about getting another lottery pick. Is that something the Blazers should prioritize? Let's talk about that to close the show. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. If you are dealing with an acute trauma in your life, talking to a therapist, a neutral third party about your issues can be immensely valuable. It can also be immensely valuable to talk to a neutral third party, a therapist, about all of the things you're dealing with if you're not dealing with an acute trauma. If you just are dealing with the challenges of everyday life, the bumps and bruises that come along with living in this world, talking to a therapist regularly can be incredibly valuable for developing the tools to become the best version of yourself, and if nothing else, just getting things off your chest in a place that is healthy and safe to do such. There are many ways to pursue therapy, but BetterHelp is one of the most convenient. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and then switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's roll along with our mailbag. Final question comes from Jessica. A version of this question was asked by many people, but Jessica sent a more specific question. Again, this is heavily edited to make the show because this was like a 3-paragraph email. LockedOnBlazersPod@gmail.com. Jessica asks, should the Blazers trade a veteran like Jeremy Grant or Malcolm Brogdon in order to acquire another lottery pick in this draft? The reasoning from Jessica that's long and I didn't include here is kind of like the Blazers are in need of players to sort of give them, in need of taking shots to sort of improve their chances of getting back to being a competitive team. And the draft is probably the best way for them to speed up that process. And maybe if you were to trade Jeremy Grant or Malcolm Brogdon for, a middling lottery pick somewhere in that, like, say like OKC gets involved. I don't know why. Jessica, that's my guess, not Jessica. Or the Spurs they only want to use one of their top 10 picks and not both. Like, say you get somewhere in that 8 through 11 range. We'll call it 6 through 11. Maybe then, is there value there? My gut here says no. My gut here says this isn't the move. I don't think it's like, I get it, and I'm not even 100% sure you could. I don't think you could trade Jeremy Grant for the 8th pick in the NBA draft. I don't think you could trade Malcolm Brogdon like just straight up for the 8th pick in the NBA draft. Maybe you could, right? Like maybe I'm wrong, but I don't. I kind of think that might be overstating what their value is, as standalone trade pieces. But even let's just carry the exercise out without getting too deep into trade value, because people get riled up about what the players on the team they root for are worth. See Magic fans over my suggestion that the Blazers should acquire Anthony Black in a certain trade involving Avery Simons. AB, beloved by me, beloved by Magic fans. Everybody likes him. But I don't think in this particular draft that the move is to load up on 3 lottery picks. The Blazers already have 4 picks in this draft that they probably can't use all of them. They've got 2 lottery picks with 3 and 14. They've got 2 second-round picks with 34 and 40. It seems very unlikely, based on having 1 open roster spot heading into the offseason and a bunch of youngsters. They're going to have 7 guys who will be coming back who are second- and third-year players on the roster if they do nothing. Not to mention DeAndre Ayton and Avery Simons, and again, like Jeremy Grant and Malcolm Brogdon. But I guess in this scenario, you'd be trading one of them. But they already have a lot of youngsters. Even if you don't include Doprith in the group of youngsters, he's like a player under guaranteed contract that's on the roster. And so you have 6 second or third year guys coming back next year. I don't think they can use all 4 draft picks. Obviously they could sign one or both of the second rounders to 2-way deals, and that would clear some things up. But even if they were just to add both lottery picks, which I think seems relatively unlikely, not very unlikely, but I'd say it's I would call it like a coin flip that they take both. And I would probably lean like 49-51 that they don't use both, that they move one of them in some way, somehow, if they can. I mean, I don't know how valuable 14 is as a trade chip, but like, I don't think while I do think cashing in Jeremy Grant and Malcolm Brogdon for like a lottery pick at some point would be incredible value. I don't see it as this draft is like, I don't think the way that folks talk about this draft that know it is like, this is a role player draft. This is a role player draft. This is not a draft where you get you're going to get high level talent. Obviously there's going to be someone in this draft who makes an all-star team. There's going to be someone in this draft who makes the freaking Hall of Fame. Like, that's just kind of how it works. Where that person is, we'll find out in 4 or 5 years. But like, I think like most experts have analyzed that I've read and listened to is like they suggested this is like the role player draft. This is a heavy draft where you can find valuable guys who are going to play in the league and be role players, but maybe not upside guys. And I think the Blazers need more upside guys. And I think adding like 3 intriguing role players to this group just doesn't get you the solution that you want. It's not terrible. Like, I don't hate it. And again, like I'm not even sure you could trade Jeremy Grant or Malcolm Brogdon for that, so it's kind of moot. But like, and if you were to trade them in the future and to end up with the 8th pick in any random draft, and any random draft ended up being a down draft, it would still be good business, right? So I think it'd be good business if you could do this. And you just kind of play the luck of the high school graduating class or whatever. But like, it's, to me, I don't think you would want, or I would not want if I was doing this, and then, like, choose your own adventure, to have 3 top 15 picks in this draft. It doesn't seem like the path forward, like a fruitful path forward. I can see why it's intriguing. Go super young, commit to going super young, take some shots at guys. Maybe you end up with the one who's the all-star and one who's the Hall of Famer. And maybe that's the move. But to me, I think it's important that the Blazers are very aggressive in exploring trades for veterans on the roster this year, all summer. Explore trades for Anthony Simons, explore trades for Malcolm Brogdon, explore trades for Jeremy Grant. Probably trade 2 of those 3 before next season. Just because, like, commit to it. You know what you're going to do. Don't hold on to it too tightly. And you don't have to trade for draft picks and youngsters. You can trade for other veterans that kind of fit the plan a little bit better. But I wouldn't want to load up on top 15 picks in this particular draft. That doesn't appeal to me. I think reasonable minds can disagree on this one. And I think if that's you think that that's the path, that's fine. And maybe Jessica does. And maybe you do, because I think other people sent me similar trade proposals that ended with the Blazers getting like 3 and 4 first round picks in this draft. And it's like, whoo, we're really going for it. Obviously you get cheaper and all the value that comes with it and all those things. That is going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow's show, we'll talk more draft stuff and round up some NBA mock drafts. And then Friday's show, you're not going to want to miss it. A whole bunch of fun. A friend of the program joining me to talk NBA draft. Come back for that one. That's what we do. 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.